Hi, welcome back to my channel, Mental Health with Melissa. I'm Melissa. Please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. Today, we're going to be talking about multi-race. Did you know that approximately 9 million individuals, or 2.9% of our American population, self-identify as multiracial? Today, we have a very special guest by the name of Dr. Jenn Noble, who is a psychologist that works specifically with mixed race teens and with their parents for parent coaching for mixed race teens. With minorities and people of color, there are challenges and topics of racism, discrimination, stereotypes that come up. And with the extra layer of having that multi-race identity, there is maybe even extra layers to what we're already talking about with people of color. So today we're going to learn more about that. So welcome back to my channel, Mental Health with Melissa. Today we have a very special guest, Dr. Jennifer Noble. She is a psychologist. She has a PhD in clinical psychology and over 15 years providing therapy to children and teens regarding multicultural communication and psychology in that field. I think that it's so important to talk about these things. So to have somebody that actually specializes in this topic and does a lot of parent coaching to parents that have children of mixed races is definitely very needed. So thank you so much for the work that you do. I think that it's, again, really important. And if you're interested, we'll give more information about your Instagram at the end, but definitely something to take a look at. So thank you so much, Dr. Noble, for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So could you give us a little bit more background? I know I kind of gave a snippet of some of your background, but could you tell us a little bit more about who you are and why you chose to join this profession?
Well, so a little bit more about who I am. Like you said, I'm a psychologist and I have a private practice, a small private practice in Los Angeles. And I also teach full-time at a community college out here in Southern California. So those are the two things that take up most of my time. And then I started a coaching program for, like you said, for parents of mixed race kids. And outside of that, well, I guess I was going to say the things that I like to do, but with quarantine, I can't even do half the things I normally like to do. But, other than that, I am mixed race myself. And so that's another reason why I try to focus on this topic. I'm a part of a nonprofit out here. It's called Multiracial Americans of Southern California, MASC for short. And I'm on their advisory board. And so they're a nonprofit that's been around for over 30 something years. And they serve mixed race folks, transracial adoptees, and then interracial couples. And so, that's a little bit of the things that I do.
Oh, great. Yeah, thank you so much for giving us more insight into that. I know that you mentioned that you're mixed race yourself. Can you tell us a little bit about your ethnic background and how that played a part in developing your profession?
Yeah, so I'm African American and Sri Lankan. So Sri Lanka is a little island off the coast of India, and I'm Tamil. There's two kind of ethnic groups there, and so for me, what I've always been aware of my background, but I think in college is when I started doing like more independent study, looking into like, oh, has anybody else written about being mixed race? And sure enough, there was, and so I kind of did a little bit of independent study then. And then in graduate school, I did more research for my dissertation on being mixed race. And then, like I said, I've been involved with the nonprofit where it's volunteer, but we work with a lot of different families and a lot of different folks. So I just, for the last, for a long time, since I've been in college, I was really going to conferences and events that really focused on the experience of being mixed race. And so I've really enjoyed adding that part of that experience to my identity, and really kind of being able to share with other people. Because even though everybody who's mixed race has a different background or experience. There's just a lot of things that we all share and we can all kind of identify with each other and say, oh yeah, I've been there too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would imagine so. Is there like a main or a common shared type of concern that comes up a lot with the mixed race people that you work with?
That I work with, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is the common concern is really trying to figure out how to navigate society, um, how friends and family and schools and whatever um, react to the person who's mixed race and maybe don't really have a space to understand, oh, okay, I get what you are. And so it's just usually that's what I end up facing is like talking about how you have to explain yourself to people or how you have to kind of keep reminding someone how to, acknowledge who you are. And so it's a lot about society kind of being like, wait, what? But the person who's mixed is like, you're making this a lot harder for me. Like if you could just adjust, everything will be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do your, I guess, your sessions differ with working with the teens and children versus the parents?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in general, or you mean with mixed race specifically, mixed race teens? Because I see all types of
Oh,
teens.
okay. I guess just within like that specific niche of the mixed race.
Yeah. Well, it actually, I guess I would say it works the same with any other teen because most of the time, if a teen is coming to see me for therapy and maybe their parent thought, oh, well, my teen is mixed race and I know that that's what you focus on. So that's who, maybe they need to get therapy from you. A lot of times it's all the other stuff that's happening in life that they want to talk about besides the fact of being mixed race, if that makes sense. So they're not really coming to therapy about being mixed race. That's not really their problem. The problem is a lot of the other same stuff that teens face, whether it be conflict with their parents, feeling misunderstood by parents, trouble with, social stuff, whether it's dating, friendships, schooling, stressors, and then larger problems like anxiety that gets in the way of that, or, high anxiety, high feelings of depression, and a host of other things. And so when I'm working with someone that's mixed race, a lot of times that'll just be a small piece of a larger puzzle. But because they want to be able to talk about that piece of the puzzle, it helps that they can be in therapy with me because they don't have to explain it to another therapist, or they can talk about it more freely and know that I'll understand what they're trying to get at or what the experience is, versus someone that might minimize it or not know how to address it, not really understand it. Yeah, but I would argue that it's usually a very small piece of a larger puzzle. And then with the parents, again, a large part of the work that I do with parents is going to be helping them better understand their teen, and how getting out of their own way as a parent, to better reach their teen. So a lot of times parents have their own ideas of, how they think you should be, how they think you should behave. And until they really figure out, oh, okay, that's how you are. And I'm putting a whole bunch of extra things on you. But if I could just look at like who you are as a person, we wouldn't have this conflict. So it's a lot of helping them do that. And then if it's parents of a mixed race teen, it's really helping them make sure that they're affirming all aspects of their kids' background. And, if cultural exposure is needed, if more talks about being mixed is needed, working together as a family to face how society is going to treat you as a family. Because, a lot of parents that have a mixed race kid get a lot of questions too. Like, is that your kid? Are you the nanny? And, oh, did you adopt that kid? And to actually very problematic things. Like sometimes, mostly what I hear is a dad might be with their mixed race kid. And then people think that the dad has kidnapped the kid, so they'll go up to the kid and be like, do you know this man? Are you safe? Like, really? Like someone's just gonna, yes, kidnapping happens, but you don't walk through the grocery store with the kid that you kidnapped, talking to them all casually. So a lot of stuff like that, helping parents understand that and then develop responses to that.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I've definitely heard of that a lot, like on social media, of that happening with, a parent that may be a person of color, and then the kid is like a mixed race and has a Caucasian parent, and then the parent that's a parent of color, there'll be like controversy over that just because
Yeah.
the kid may look more like the other parent or something.
Right.
And you said something really interesting earlier too, when you were talking about working with the children or the teens that are mixed race, and how in therapy, or even the parents, without knowing, may minimize the conversations about race. And I think that in our society, we have a tendency to do that. And I actually did a video about being a therapist of color, providing therapy to people of color, and how versus maybe somebody that's Caucasian that provides therapy to people of color, and not bringing up the topic of race, because
Right.
studies have shown that Caucasians are less likely to bring it up due to discomfort.
Yes.
And race and ethnicity are a huge part of us, especially as people of color. And so that's something that's very absent sometimes from conversations. And so when you bring that up, that sparks this, this importance of needing to have those types of conversations. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. And so, kind of going on to that topic, how do you bring it up? Or do you feel like there's not necessarily a special way to bring it up in your practice with whether it be the teens of mixed race or the parents?
Yeah, I don't think there's any special way to bring it up. I just bring it up. I just go there and talk about it, and or I'll ask directly about how that plays out in their life. Most people that seek me out, I think they know that that's a topic that I'm already comfortable talking about, whether it be just being a minority or being mixed race specifically, and so they'll automatically feel safe to just bring it up right away. But yeah, I think otherwise, if I'm working with parents, especially white parents of mixed race kids, I definitely make it a point to bring it up directly and kind of help them go there when they need to, because like you said, they may even be more reluctant to like bring it up in a conversation with me. So if I can sense that we need to, I'll, go ahead and be like, all right, so what about this? And then they can, oh, okay, now I can talk about it because somebody opened the door.
So in your experience, working with parents that are white, what would you say is the like the common, I guess it's hard to say, there usually isn't a common denominator, but just based on your practice with them, what would you say is usually the topic of discomfort, and having them bring up the topic of race or mixed race?
I really just think the discomfort is around really understanding how to talk about something that this parent just doesn't understand. And they know they don't understand it, meaning a lot of the parents might be at least aware enough to say, well, I know I've had a very different experience in the world as a white person. So now I'm scared to bring up this topic because I'm not sure if I'll know how to talk about it with my kid, because they're going to share experiences that I won't know how to identify with. I won't know how to say, yeah, me too. I won't know how to have solutions for them to, navigate these issues. And so I think it makes them very reluctant to just broach the topic altogether. And, every once in a while I work with a good amount of white parents who have done a lot of reading, a lot of their own preparation. They have a lot of their own awareness around race and their place, at least in our American society. And so they feel much more comfortable to talk with their kid. But for parents that really haven't done a lot of that investigation, they really feel like, I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't know how to start. I don't know what to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly. And I think that that's great that you are bringing up the topic and finding a way to transition that topic in a comfortable manner, because it can be uncomfortable for somebody that just doesn't have the experience doing it, right? And so, yeah, it's really interesting work that you're doing, and again, much needed. I
Yeah.
wanted to bring up too, so I really love your IGTVs. They're like really fun.
Oh,
And you're so energetic. You're just so fun to watch. I love them. So I was watching
yeah.
one from January, and you said that self-hate in mixed race kids is a huge thing because they're hyper aware of how they look, and people think that there are certain ways that certain races should look, and being aware of picking up apart our phenotypes. So that was a really interesting topic that you talked about. And again, there's just not a lot of information on social media that you bring, because you have a very specific aspect that you bring. And I'm really glad that you talked about this. And you also mentioned in that same IGTV that, due to white supremacy and standards, it creates this expected type of beauty of how beauty should look like. And so with mixed race people or mixed race teens
Yeah.
specifically, it can be harder because there's all these societal standards of what one should look like. So can you talk more about the phenotype and this idea of these societal standards that you were talking about a little bit in your IGTV?
Sure. Well, phenotype, first of all, is just the way that you look, our physical features. That's the simplest way to put it. I'm sure we could give a more involved definition, but that's the simplest way to look at it. Like eye color, hair texture, skin color, like I said, nose shape, whatever, height. So that is one of the most important sort of pieces of being mixed race, is because everybody is evaluating what they look like. And this is why one of the most common questions that mixed race people get is like, what are you? Because people look at them and they want to put them in one of our classic 5 categories. And they're like, I can't tell what category you're in. And so that becomes a frustration for mixed race people if they get that question a lot, which some may not get that question that much. Like if I were to compare myself to, I would say I'm probably, on the spectrum of 1 to 10, 10 meaning you get this question all the time. I'm definitely not at the 10, because people look at me and they just automatically assume, oh, that's a Black woman, I don't need to ask her anything. But certainly I do get the what are you question, but there are some people that get it every day, all the time, and it just really wears on them. And so what is sort of happening on the inside is that that same person might look in the mirror and say, why don't I look more blah? I wish I had this, I wish I had that, because then the world would see me as whatever thing I want them to see me as. So this is where you get the idea of like not being enough. So a lot of times, I would say especially, well, no, I won't. I was going to say a lot of times it's very common if they have a white parent, like white Asian or white Black or white Latino, something like that. But really, it really doesn't make a difference, because phenotype is just what it is. But a lot of times people will look at themselves and say, I wish I looked more blah, or I don't look blah enough. And that's often a thing that they face. And so if they get that enough, where everybody else outside is like, oh, you're Asian? Well, you don't look that Asian. And then they start to feel like, well, then am I not allowed to be it if I don't look it?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when they start to internalize outside standards and kind of beat themselves up about it. Like, oh, well, maybe if I, or they could look not white enough, or not whatever the other thing is enough. And it's constantly this dance of trying to please what everybody else wants you to look like, rather than sitting back and saying, wait a minute, you don't get to tell me whether I'm Asian or enough or not. I literally have an Asian parent and a whole Asian side of my family. So relax, like that's your problem if you're just going to look at my features and categorize me, then it's way too simplistic. Like, so that person has to be able to get there to be like, you're being too simplistic. You're just looking at the outside and judging a book by its cover. I know who I am. And I think for some people, it's much easier said than done to say, I know who I am.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I mean, that's such an important topic, especially you bring up the age-old question for people of color, but I'm sure most of all for mixed race, what are you?
I find that my life now is just a never-ending guessing game of where are you really from, It's just exhausting to get it all the time. Like I was at a party recently, and a guy I did not even know approached me from across the party, and without even knowing my name, the first words out of his lips were, I'm sorry, but what kind are you? Like I'm some sort of unmarked dessert on a buffet bar,
Yeah.
And that can be a triggering question, especially when people of color are already minorities. And then again, I imagine that mixed race having to deal with that question time and time again, when it kind of makes it sound like you're not a human even.
Yes, it's very othering. It's very dehumanizing. It's very invalidating. And just to kind of go off your point, I do think mixed race people face it. They have an extra piece that's a little different because, quote unquote, their own people can be like, what are you? And so then you're not only are you feeling othered by like dominant society asking and wondering what group you fit in, but then people that you think, okay, I'm a part of this group, and they still are like, I don't know if you are. And so it's like from multiple sides, they get this idea of feeling like they are unseen, on some level.
Yeah. And already dealing with that question is just, it can, like you said, feel dehumanizing and painful to cope with. But you're right, it adds a completely extra layer when you have to deal with it from people that are within your own race, right? Or have the same ethnic background as you.
Yeah.
So kind of continuing to go off of that topic, if that's something that somebody is struggling with, how do you work with them to, and I think you did already mention this about kind of putting that back on the person, and more specifically, how do you kind of work through that with your client?
Yeah, it is, like I said, it's easier said than done for some people, but it's this idea of where is your validation coming from, and unfortunately, a lot of the way that all humans live their life is looking for validation from other people. Sometimes it can work, like maybe you get a lot of validation from the outside and you really don't have to ever question yourself, but we really, it's important to take the time and do the introspection to be like, have I validated myself? Do I like believe in myself and see myself and recognize myself to be who I know myself to be? Because that's the strength. That's the resilience that you need to face the outside question over and over and over again. So it's a matter of working with that person to help them, number one, see that they've always known who they are. They only started to question who they were when other people gave them questions. So helping them get back to a core sense of like, you already know who you are. Why are you looking for the validation? What exactly would it do? And just kind of challenging that belief of like, maybe the false belief is, again, I'm Black and Mexican or something. I'm just trying to think of a different example we haven't given yet. But maybe this person is thinking, if I could just get the Mexican side of my family to acknowledge, and validate my Mexican-ness, I will feel 1, 2, and 3. And I get to work with them and be like, is that really going to ever happen? You're going to literally have every Mexican in the face of the whole planet, wherever they live, they're going to come and validate you. Like, that's impossible. You're always going to find someone that's like, I don't think so. So then clearly it has to come from you instead, and so instead of working to please other people and change who you are and change the way you talk or interact or dress or what you do and don't eat and all of those things in the face of other people, like almost like you're performing for them, trying to find an authentic place to just do what you know and do what you know, live what you live.
Mm-hmm.
And then the folks that are going to accept you are going to accept you, and the folks that don't aren't, and you're good either way, you know. I would argue that the more you are able to accept yourself and then walk out in the world and be like, this is just me, you actually get more validation than when you try to do what everybody thinks you should be doing. Mm-hmm. And people underestimate that. I mean, if you think about like some of the celebrities out there in the world, like some of them are just like odd people. Like in real life, you're like, that person is weird, but they're weird and they're being fully themselves, which draws us to them like, oh, like, I like who you are. Like, you're just like a weird person, but you're cool. Like, I like it. And they're like, yep, this is me, you know?
Yeah, I love that point. Like when you radiate that energy, then people are drawn to you because that's your true authentic self.
Yeah.
And it sounds like hearing you talk about this, a huge part of it is working with people to help them find that confidence and really heal those low self-esteem concerns that they have. And so I really love that because that kind of goes back to anybody or even teens and people, adolescents that are going through their developmental stages and having a hard time with puberty as it is, right? And then again, when we're talking about race and mixed race kids, that it's the extra component there. And so by really focusing on that confidence and being proud of who you are and I guess what you are, which is a human at the end of the day, like we all are, that radiates to other people. And that's really special. So I think that that's a really good point that you bring up. You know, the other thing that I wanted to talk about too, especially speaking to, you know, another therapist of color is with the recent events of all of the Asian hate crimes. Like there's this statistic that I read is that in New York City, Asian hate crimes have skyrocketed by, I believe it was 1,900%.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, although any number of hate crimes is not okay, I'm really interested to learn how therapists are speaking with their clients of color, you know, especially with Asian clients. So has that come up at all for you in your practice? And if it's so, can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, that's a good, not quite yet. I think only a little bit. I would say, I think it's sort of just happening. And so I think people are, I have a few Asian clients and I think they're just starting to think about it. So there are a few that are like worried about their own older family members, either checking in on them or making sure that other people are with them doing certain tasks. So I think that's one of the, I don't know, that's a big impact already to just already say, oh, I need to keep this person safe. Like who can go grocery shopping with them? Who can go on a walk with them? Where they didn't have to worry about that before. So I guess what I'm seeing now is very early on, just increased anxiety, you know, which makes sense. When you have a very real threat, it would make us a little bit more vigilant, a little bit more concerned, a little bit more aware. So I would say that's all I've seen thus far. But certainly I've seen a lot more involvement, I guess, online and posting online from different accounts.
Mm-hmm. And what sort of psychoeducation do you think is important to get out there to our communities of color and our Asian communities as well, in terms of this extra layer of anxiety that you're talking about?
That's a tough one because it's anxiety in response to a very real threat. So I almost feel hesitant to say, oh, you know, you just got to relax, take a deep breath. Like, no, like you, unfortunately, that's the reality is like you you actually might have to be more aware. And depending on where you live, you really might want to discourage somebody from, going somewhere that they normally would have gone. So I don't think that in my thought right now, I feel hesitant to sort of try to reduce the anxiety. But I would say that if it's Asians or other populations that haven't really thought about racism directed at Asians, so that could be any group, then I think that's an important place to start, to really sit back and say, hey, yes, there is a model minority myth, and in some ways, Asians have been protected from certain levels of racism. It is not by any means making them immune to racism, and that there has actually been lots of problematic types of racism against Asians for a long, long time. It's just that we haven't paid attention to that because, like I said, we've just been, oh, they're the model minority. We just look at all the good things they do. But there's been a lot of suffering, a lot of racism, a lot of hatred towards this group. And so if this is a person who is a part of that group or part of a group that has ignored it, I would want to encourage people to poke around and learn a little bit more and really say, oh, okay, this is not new. This is definitely not out of the blue, like this is the first time ever. No way.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a really important point, because a lot of people don't think about the historical component, right? Hate crimes against Asians is not new, and racism against Asians is not new. I mean, we see just a few decades ago the internment of all Japanese Americans in this country that we live in. And so, when I say, I agree with you, when I say psychoeducation, I don't mean in terms of taking away that anxiety and being okay with it, but and kind of just to piggyback off more of what you're saying, but really sitting in those feelings and also acknowledging that this exists for Asians and for other minorities. And we need to be very conscientious of this and recognize that these are concerns that we have in our country and in our society, so that we don't repeat history, because that's something that, that history tends to repeat itself. I say that a lot, and it's true. And so having these conversations is so important. And so I'm really glad that we're here talking about it. But I want to be respectful of your time. Before I kind of finish up with my last question, do you have anything else in response that you wanted to say to that? I didn't want to cut you off.
No. You were making me think that if nothing else, the psychoeducation should be, what is the larger problem here? It's not who's a victim of racism and who isn't, and who's more and who's less. It's that racism itself is the problem that everybody can fight against and learn to kind of dismantle. And so that the opposite side of any ism really is kind of working and fighting for equality. So the thing that all groups can fight for is equality for everyone, as much as we can achieve that. And to me, I think that's the real focus. It's not like, oh, I need to learn about what they're doing here and what's the umbrella issue here? Let's fight against the umbrella issue. It'll solve it for everybody,
Yeah, well said. I completely agree with that. So lastly, people that are interested in mental health professions that don't necessarily know exactly what road to take. I have different people come on and they talk about their educational background and how to get to where they're at in their profession. And so if somebody watched this video and asked you, I really love the work that you do, and I'm really interested to know how you got to where you're at. I know we talked a little bit about that, but what was your educational history to get to your position now?
Yeah. Okay. So undergrad, of course. So I did a double major in undergrad. I did psychology and Spanish. And then I went on and I was kind of advised to do that. I'm in California, like I said, and we have a lot of bilingual folks, but especially bilingual folks that speak Spanish. And so I was advised, hey, that's really going to open up your job opportunities. Should you really learn it well? So that was the rationale behind it. But then I went into a program to get my master's in clinical psychology, and it was really a master's and PhD in one. So um, after a couple of years, we sort of finished our master's and continued on to get the doctorate. So I chose a PhD. There's also PsyD, and maybe you've had a guest who's a PsyD, but PhD has more research focus, whereas the PsyD is really training you heavily to be a clinician. So I was able to get the exposure to, a lot of research and also a lot of clinical training. And I think at the time I chose that because I thought, you know what, I am interested in research. I don't know that I want to do it full time, but I think I wanted the exposure. And then I also had mentors at the time that really this ID degree was kind of new then. And so there was a little discouragement of like, go with the degree that everybody knows right now, like don't shoot yourself in the foot. Like you're already a minority, a woman, like blah, blah, blah. Like, okay, make sure that they can really recognize your credentials. So that was also part of the calculation. But then I did all of my training for my doctorate with adolescents, always like low income minority families, and in all different settings. And then I think more recently is when I decided, hey, you know what? Here is a niche that I don't see a lot of people meeting. So I was already very comfortable and culturally competent to work with racial minorities. And so I knew I always wanted to do that. But this was an area, like I said, like the mixed race experience was not something we got to learn about in my graduate program. And I had done my own research and my own work outside in a nonprofit. So I was like, you know what, if nothing else, I need to be able to serve people in this way, and make sure that people know that there are other folks out there that are culturally competent to understand the mixed race experience, so that's become a goal of mine in the last probably 5 years.
Okay. And do you mind sharing what you wrote your dissertation on?
Oh gosh, the title, I don't know, so long, but it was basically looking at 3 factors, like being mixed race, but cultural exposure and how that impacted your level of racial prejudice. And so my thought was, by virtue of being mixed race, you would have more cultural exposure just within your own family. And so that would make you probably more accepting or less prejudiced towards other groups. And I did want to try to compare, different types of group, but my sample size was a little too small. But overall, I was able to kind of get at the first part of my goal, which was, if you have more cultural exposure, you're going to have less racial prejudice, which makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. Is there anything else that you wanted to share before we wrap up?
No, I think that's it. I mean, unless people want to find me, I'm sure you'll share all my handles, but I'm Dr. Jenn Psych everywhere, and spend most of my time on Instagram pretty much.
Yeah, so definitely check out her Instagram page at Dr. Jenn Psych. And I wanted to share one of your posts before we kind of end today. And this actually, I think, I found this and I saved it because I just really liked it a lot, like what you said in this post. But what's interesting is when we were talking about mixed race teens and working with them because of that, again, that question that can be very labeling and dehumanizing. You talked about this and you mentioned this. So I just think that it's such a coincidence that that came up. And then I chose this specific post earlier, but it's be who you are to the one person who matters, you. And I thought that was very sweet. And you said, I sometimes wonder when we become so worried about what other people think about who we are. Is it just deeply tied to our human need for belonging? Is it the pressure to conform to a certain set of morals? Is it rooted and not feeling we mattered enough to those who knew us first, aka our parents. And it's a long post. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but again, that first sentence, be
Mhm.
who you are to the one person who matters, you. I think that that's so important. And again, if you get the chance, please check out Dr. Jenn Psych. That's her Instagram handle. And are you accepting new clients and new referrals at this time?
I'm pretty full right now, but I mean, people can always reach out, because if I can, I'll try to connect them to other folks. I mean, I've been working pretty hard to find other clinicians that are either very culturally competent or culturally competent in the mixed race experience specifically. So it never hurts to email me anyway. But I don't have as many openings as I wish I could right now.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video, and a big thank you to Dr. Jenn Noble, who has shared so much information with us today. If you're interested in learning more about the type of services she provides and just hearing her talk, please visit her Instagram. It is Dr. Jenn Psych. I'm going to have all of the links down below. Thank you so much. And remember, managing mental health matters.